Hi, I'm Andy Acton.
And I'm Chris Strevens.
This is Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. A truly fascinating conversation with a dentist that, by his own descriptions, had a portfolio career. And that's quite unusual in today's modern dentistry.
Yeah, I tell you what, I always think Raj is, we've known him for a long time, but he is one of the calmest. He mentions, it was his auntie or uncle mentioned a gentle spirit.
Yeah.
And he's definitely a man who exudes a gentle spirit, doesn't he? You know, in every interaction I've always had, he's such a great advisor. I imagine as a mentor, he is brilliant.
But that calmness, you had a real sense that calmness has passed through his dental career when he was saying the philosophy about get good at something and then start to make it efficient and improve the speed of how you do it. Whereas I just feel we're in a place at the moment where everybody's in a rush.
Well, what's that thing, isn't it? You know, what's Oliver say from FTA Media? Isn't it something like the attention span's like 7 seconds or something? So unless something's happened, unless you're interested in 7 seconds, we're on to something else. And I mean, that's a shocking indictment of an anathema to Raj, which is that, you know, he's like, we're just going to take our time, and he's been massively successful with. Do you know what I mean?
And the different areas of dentistry, he's directly touched through being a dentist and a practice owner, but then also as an associate dean and an advisor to the Department of Health, and as a trainer and an educator. He really has spanned so many different areas, and there's so much wisdom in that episode. I think that anybody connected in dentistry, whether you're a dentist or not, will take something from that.
There will be a takeaway for everybody.
Absolutely, for sure. Really, really excellent episode. So here we are, beautiful sunny day, 7:00 Monday morning.
It's a beautiful day, isn't it? My sun is out, coffee in my hand, orange juice.
Do you think people believe that we actually do this at 7:00 on a Monday morning?
Possibly. Some people may well do. So let's not shatter.
Illusion.
Shatter their illusion, because it's all in their voice, isn't it? So
It is.
The fact that if they're watching it on YouTube, they'll know that I'm not in my pajamas and I haven't got a cup of coffee or orange juice.
But for the purpose of this, it's 7:00 on a Monday morning.
It is.
And today we have a legend of dentistry joining us. We've got Dr. Raj Rattan MBE. Raj is a dentist, an ex-principal, international speaker, the dental director at Dental Protection, and a former policy advisor to the Department of Health.
Flip.
Morning, Raj. That was a mouthful to get through. You've done a lot.
Massive business card.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. It is a very bright sunny day, as you can see from the window behind me. So it's a beautiful day.
It is.
It's lovely.
The introduction serves to how much you've already done in dentistry, and I'm sure there's a lot more to
so
come.
young.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Before we get to the dental bit, can we kind of roll back to get a sense of you and your childhood and your family life and who Raj is before we get into the dentistry bit?
Yes, of course. So basically, we, as a family, we came to England when I was about 6 or 7 years old. So my parents, my brother and myself. So I'm the elder of two children, and did most of my schooling here when we first arrived, and was very fortunate, actually. I had some fantastic friends and some amazingly influential teachers as well, particularly in the early years of my education. And I found myself quite often remembering things that they'd said to me, and what an influence they had on me in terms of my thinking. And also a huge influence by my parents. My mother was a teacher, my father was in the police force. There were two very different characters.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from them, and I just wish I could have had more time with my dad. And I lost my mother very recently. She was 88, and I look back and I think the wisdom that they passed on was just astonishing, really.
Was your dad a policeman in the UK?
Yes. So what happened was, Chris, my father was in the police force in East Africa, and he would often come to England to the training college at Colindale.
Oh, Henry,
and then returned back to East Africa, because when we were there, We lived in Tanzania, but in my childhood it was Tanganyika, so it was under British rule.
Right.
And so a lot of the training that the police received was done over here in the UK. Yeah.
Wow. I was just thinking, so it must have been, so when he came and he's a policeman, I'm just thinking that would probably be quite culturally interesting and challenging, I would imagine. I'm trying to work out, would that be like the 70s, maybe something like that? Or?
Yes, it was late 60s, Chris, and you're very perceptive in what you say, because it was a very different environment.
Yeah.
In East Africa, we have some pictures of him, which are sort of hand drawn, hand drawn by my uncle, as it happens, in his uniform, and he's carrying a pistol, because that was common practice to do that. So when we came to the UK, he then shifted his focus away from sort of active policing and went more onto the civil service side of policing.
Right.
So he had a career in the civil service.
Brilliant.
Wow.
So why dentistry, Raj? You've got a mother that's a teacher, a father that's in the police. Have you got other family members? Is there a history of dentistry in the Rattan family?
There isn't, no. And I was the eldest grandchild in the family. If you look across the family now, there's a few dentists and there are many sort of medics in the family. I think it's fair to say that at that time, the cultural ambition, if I can use that phrase, that parents had for their children was to go into healthcare. And medicine as a first choice. So I remember talking to my aunt, who at the time was studying in the UK for her American exam. She's a medic. She's now retired. Saying to my aunt, "Auntie, I can't decide between medicine and dentistry." And she said, "My advice to you, Raj, is to do dentistry," because she said she felt I was too, in inverted commas, soft. My personality was a gentle personality, to use a phrase that she used. And she said, you'll struggle with the tragedy that accompanies a medical career. And she said, I will worry that you won't be able to cope with it. So she said dentistry would be, in my view, she said, an option. And my oldest friend, somebody who I've known since I was aged 8 and later became my business partner. And as it happens, somebody I'm having dinner with this evening, he had gone into dentistry, and I think I was influenced by him as well.
Yeah. So do you remember your first ever patient?
I do remember my first ever patient, indeed. A patient whose initials were GZ, a Greek gentleman who ran a nightclub in Leicester Square and would often bring tickets to us at the dental school to attend.
That's not bad bit of pre-business there, isn't it? Really?
Over recent times, you become quite well known in the medico-legal world. But I'm fascinated because there's an entrepreneurial side to you as well, in that you had 3 practices, one in partnership, a number of pilot sites, and the practices were mixed and one was largely private.
Yes.
When you started out, did you always see that you were going to be an entrepreneurial dentist and there was going to be a business side to what you did? Or did that
just happen?
Did it just fall out of the world that you were in?
To be perfectly honest, I've never seen myself with that entrepreneurial badge, if you like. Even today, it's a word that's often or sometimes used as you've used it. I've never seen it like that myself. So for me, I enjoyed dentistry, and my core belief then, as it is now, was always, if you enjoy your work and you focus on your primary function, which is to look after patients, then actually there are commercial benefits that will follow. So for me, that was the order in which to do things. And, I still say the same. I went to see a lovely couple a few weeks ago who've opened a new practice. And, one of them is an ex-foundation trainee from my vocational training scheme. And we were sitting there chatting away, and they've got off to a flying start. And it was absolutely refreshing to hear them say something very similar, because having been on my VT scheme, I hope I influenced them in their thinking. So for me, it was always about patient first, and the benefits will follow.
It's very interesting. I suppose we've known you for probably 30 years or something. I
Yes,
suppose.
indeed,
It's
Chris,
amazing.
yes.
And in my head, I've always had you as you always seem to be a chap who's very interested in educating and trainer. I sort of feel in my that you sort of. It's funny you mentioned your mum as a teacher, but it's that sort of thing. I always feel that whenever I've met you, everything you've tried to do is to educate either the existing generation of dentists or the new generation of dentists, and that sort of fits with what you're describing. The fact of it's lovely, isn't it? The fact that when were they your FD student?
So I was appointed a course organizer in 1990.
Wow.
I'm very lucky. I felt I was very fortunate to be appointed, and for me, it was a long-standing ambition fulfilled. So I'd been in practice for a number of years. And I was in that foundation training role for 17 years. And really the only reason I gave it up was because I'd been offered the job of dental director of dental protection. And so for me, the hardest part, it wasn't a difficult decision, because I felt so privileged to be offered the dental protection role, but it did mean I had to give up the foundation training role. So there was a hint of regret as well.
Sure.
On my side, I was going on to a new job. I was looking forward to that. But I thought to myself, gosh, I've been doing this for 17 odd years, and I will miss the educational component. And to be fair, I think I still do to some extent. Although at DPL, we do obviously have a range of educational courses, and I still do some guest lectures on foundation training schemes.
And how long ago were this couple? Were they your FD?
They were on my scheme 95, 96.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it? What's that, 95? Yeah. Cool, that's a long time, for them to then still have you in that high regard. That I think the lovely thing is, isn't it, that quite often you have no idea what impact you might have on someone, because you never know.
No.
But it's lovely that someone actually was able to say, look, this is something that you helped us with, even though you might not have known it at the time.
I'm getting a strong sense that those enduring relationships really matter for you. You talked about your friend when you were 8 years old, you were in business with them. You talked about an FD student from the 90s that you recently met. We've known you for a couple of decades. You strike me as somebody who once you have a connection with somebody, you really invest in that relationship because it's meaningful.
And you have absolutely hit the nail on the head, because for me, that historic connection with foundation training gives me as much of a buzz today as it did when I first walked into that postgraduate centre in Whipps Cross and delivered my first presentation. For me, that's really what it's all about. If somebody turns around and says, actually, I came to your course, or I listened to you talk, or I remember you saying, and often they remember the stories. I remember the story about the watch, or I remember the story about the car, and then that reminds them of the principal, and that just brings a smile to my face, and if I can say it in these words, a sort of a warmth to my heart, really.
Well, I think that was. So I was going to say, do you remember? I think you did that. That on Mehi's Dental Collective, didn't you? Global Dental Collective, Dentorama, I think it was, and you were part of the thing about the GDC. Yes. It was probably a couple of years ago.
Yes,
and it was funny. You told your story about the drill breaking, and what was really funny, Raj, was you probably don't know, but we were talking obviously to a lot of the dentists afterwards, and we've spoken about you at these events, especially at that event, and the number of people who said, yeah, I remember that story. So it's fascinating that for that story that you've told, it's resonated through, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of dentists who remember that as a story.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Facts go to the brain and stories go to the heart. And when you tell a good story, people remember the story, which, as you just said, reminds them of the learning point. Whereas if you just regale some stats or figures at somebody, they're meaningless without context. Yes. But you tell your story so well that you remember the story, which is the trigger to then put you on the path as to what
I
the
remember
learning
it. I think
point
we
is.
remember it. I can't tell you how many times I've told people about it.
Yeah. Your career, you mentioned about FD training, but you were an associate dean, policy advisor to Department of Health, writer, international speaker, you're a dental director. You've also studied philosophy. You really have covered such a broad spectrum. And
man of mystery.
yeah, and you refer to yourself as having kind of a portfolio career. Do you think that's still possible today in the way that dentistry has evolved? Do you still think that as an opportunity is still there, or are people becoming much more focused and specialised in their approach to their careers?
I think it very much depends on the individual. Somebody who has aspirations to specialize in a particular branch of dentistry, then I can completely understand that they would want to focus on the clinical side. For me, I had my clinical interest is in endodontics. Beyond that, I see myself very much as a general dental practitioner. And the other things that I did was purely because I was interested in them. I didn't ever apply for anything because I thought it would be a good career move. I only applied for things when I felt actually I wouldn't mind doing that, or I'm interested in this subject, and wouldn't it be great if I could have an opportunity to make a contribution? So, and what then tends to happen is, if you've done a few things, then your name gets kind of known, and then people say, well, actually, I know you've done this, Raj. Would you be interested in doing this now? So I think once the door opens, opportunities come by, and some opportunities you look at and think, actually, that's not really for me. I've had occasions where I've said to people, listen, I'm flattered you're asking me, but that's not within my skill set. I don't think I'm the best person for that role. So I'm happy to help you in a peripheral capacity, but I think we need somebody more in tune with what you're trying to do. So in
hindsight, have you passed up anything? Do you know you always get those actors that were offered the role of James Bond and they said no? Were you offered anything in your career that in hindsight you should have taken?
No, I think I can honestly say I haven't. And equally well on that note, I don't think I've ever taken anything that I've later regretted.
Right, nice.
Yeah. Once or twice in the past I've felt actually I'm putting myself under a lot of pressure here, with deadlines, particularly when it comes to writing, because publishers quite rightly demand manuscripts to deliver, within certain timelines, and sometimes you think, gosh, I've got 2 weeks to write this and I haven't even started. So I think occasionally I felt I was putting myself under pressure. But that's probably poor time management on my part, to be honest.
Right, yeah.
Do you like writing, Raj?
I do like writing, and I've always enjoyed writing, even when I was as a schoolboy. It was a hobby, and I used to write, in those days, I used to write science fiction in my school holidays.
Oh, really?
The problem now, of course, is I still have some of those stories here in my study on the shelf. The problem is, what was science fiction now is boringly science fact. So,
I remember my mother-in-law. She died a couple of years ago, and she was 96, I think. And she says she can remember when she was at school, which must have been, I don't know, wartime or something. And they were asked, put something that's never going to happen. And she put, we're never going to get someone on the moon.
Lovely.
It's that whole thing, isn't it? As you say, what was science fiction is now science fact.
Yeah.
Do you remember Tomorrow's World?
Do.
There'll be only a certain number of us who remember Tomorrow's World.
Maggie Philbin.
All those things. Maggie Philbin, and all those things that they say, this is what it's going to look like. And some of them, I think, came true, didn't they? I mean, some of them were fantastical and never did.
But you say about your science fiction, you did have some short stories broadcast on radio stations, didn't you? So it's not just that you just did dental writing. It wasn't. It wasn't as a kid. You actually got stuff broadcast on the radio.
My goodness, I'm amazed you know that. So when I was at dental school, Capital Radio, the London radio station, they used to have a series of late night horror stories. which were called Moment of Terror. They were broadcast around about midnight, quite short stories. And I'd submitted some stories, and I was very lucky because one of the editors had written back to me and said, I like this story, but it's way too long. Please shorten it. And I took that as a very positive sign. So I shortened it, sent it back, and they accepted it. So that was actually my first writing breakthrough. And then I had a second one that was broadcast, and there were 3 more that were due to be broadcast, but the series then came to an end. So, and then somewhere on a cassette tape, I
got it.
I had the copy of the stories.
That's brilliant, though. It's a brilliant
lovely
legacy to have, isn't it?
Yeah.
In fact, you've got that wound up somewhere that you can. You probably need to put it onto like something else. You probably need to get it transferred onto a digital file rather than send it to all your friends and family. They can all sit round at Christmas.
Like now, we're recording this podcast, so I'm guessing in 100, 200 years, if somebody was so desired, they would be able to find this somewhere. But back in the day, when it was held on a physical tape of sorts, fairly recently, they've only unearthed some of the fairly early sort of 1970s comedy shows from the BBC, from the archives, where they've been misfiled, and suddenly somebody's pulled out a lost episode of the Two Ronnies or something, isn't it? So the world has changed.
Yeah. I must
go on.
Quickly, you mentioned Tomorrow's World, and as you were talking about Tomorrow's World, if you noticed me smiling, and the reason was because I participated. I wasn't on camera; I was kind of behind camera, participating in a live broadcast of Tomorrow's World, because we were demonstrating the first milling machine that was used in the UK. So it was CEREC 1.
Wow.
And there was a demonstration of CEREC 1 on television, and the program was broadcast live. And so the inlay was shown as being milled, and then the camera was going to come back to the inlay 2 or 3 minutes later once it had been milled. And my job was that when the camera was then away from the milling machine, to take my shoes off, because you could hear the shoes on the tiled floor, walk up to CEREC 1 and open the chamber so the camera could then have a clear view, and then rush off screen again. So
really?
we participated with Siemens on a live broadcast, and that was an amazing experience.
I bet.
Oh,
when was that? What year was that then?
Oh gosh, that would have been, I'm guessing it would have been, I was involved with CEREC 1 in 1988. We did the first CEREC course in 88 at the University of Zurich. So this would have been around about 1989, 1990.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
TV star, we could have that. Off-screen TV star.
Yeah. I love the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. And I guess what's quite interesting, that's quite a common phrase in African culture. Given where you were brought up, there's a link. But you've mentored thousands of people, either directly or indirectly. And I think the essence of that phrase is it's about mentoring and helping people grow. There'll be so many people, when Chris was saying about, that Dentorama event, where so many people were kind of leaning into your stories. Can you think back to your early days in dentistry, and who were your mentors and who was kind to you when you first joined the profession?
So I worked in 2 different practices part-time. They were both very different. One was in South London, one was in Northwest London. And the principals of those practices, the one in South London had 2 principals, and the one in Northwest London was a gentleman who has since retired. The practice is still there. I often drive past it, actually. And they were incredibly supportive and very influential. And I can remember in particular in Northwest London, where my principal was a gentleman called Jonathan Portler. And I remember Jonathan saying to me when I arrived at his practice, he said, Raj, he said, don't talk to me about doing things quickly. Don't talk to me about cutting corners. He said, because the philosophy that I want to teach you is you first learn to do it well, then you learn to do it efficiently. And, at a time when the focus really was on doing things as inverted commas quickly as possible, because that was the payment system. So, it was all about efficiency. This was a refreshing attitude, and it kind of set me on a slightly different path. I'm very grateful to Jonathan for that. And also at my other practice, the two principals who were there, they gave me so much latitude in terms of how I worked, because they knew I was a new graduate and they wanted to have a positive impact on me. So I was very, very lucky. In terms of influence, I remember going to the London hospital one year, being offered a position as a part-time demonstrator, only to find 2 or 3 days later they'd changed their policy on part-time demonstrators. And so I'd never got a chance to take that position up. And I remember coming home, and I'll be very honest with you, I was tearful, because, for me, education was an ambition, a long-held ambition. Suddenly, one day be told, okay, we'll take you. You can teach here a day a week, and then 3 days later to receive a phone call to say, really sorry, Raj, but we have to give you some sad news that we're not taking part-time demonstrators anymore. So you go from a high to a low.
Yeah.
So those were the sort of key moments for me educationally.
And then in 2008, your services to dentistry were recognised and you were awarded an MBE.
Yes, very, very, very kind, very, very humbling experience. And
but it's unusual in dentistry. There aren't many people that receive a Queen's Award as it was then, in dentistry. I think we've spoken to Jason Warren. There's been one or two others. Many of us are never going to experience what's that like. Can you just walk us through what that day was like when you went to the palace to receive your award?
Yes. So basically what happened was, what used to happen in those days was we'd get the post that would come to the house. My wife would open the post in the morning. She'd kind of sort it for me. This is important. This is
in the bin.
Important. This is urgent. So I remember coming home. I'd been working in the morning. It was a Saturday morning. I remember coming home saying to her, "Is there anything in the post?" And she said, "No, there's nothing in the post. It's just the usual stuff." So in the post was the letter.
Oh, really?
That she described as the useful stuff,
Was she teasing you, or she just overlooked it?
She just completely overlooked it. So, so what I actually did was, I remember saying to her, we have 3 children. I said, I'm going to tell the children, and I'm going to write down their reaction. So, whatever they said, I wrote it down, so I had it recorded for posterity.
Oh, cool.
And then when you actually get to the day, it was a very warm day. It's a little bit surreal. I mean, I think, so we were allowed to take a number of guests. So I took my son, who's the middle of the 3 children. The other 2 were involved in exams. My mother came along, which for me was very important, and my wife came along as well. And my wife's recollection of the day is just driving through the gates of Buckingham Palace. She said that for her was a very special moment. And I just tried to take it all in, tried to take in the history of the environment I was in, and it is a very humbling experience, and also talking to the other recipients as well. People have done amazing things in their lives. Amazing things in their lives, but it is a special day, and I think for me it was really a way of acknowledging the influence of my parents. So it was very important that my mother was there.
Lovely.
And I think the family also saw it in the same way, really.
That's brilliant. A very special day.
Yeah, especially middle son who can say to his 2 siblings, "Ha ha."
Yeah.
Here's me with Dad.
And I mean, you are one of the UK's best known dentists, and you've got a great overview of the profession. So what's your take on the mood of dentistry at the moment? What are you worried about? What are the things that are bothering you in dentistry today?
Andy, the thing is, the mood, it saddens me that people are so disillusioned with the profession. And I think there's a lot of frustration around contract reform. I appreciate the challenges that presents. I'm not being in any way critical of the government because it's not an easy thing to do. But I think it is contributing to the mood. And also there is just this general anxiety, I think, about litigation, which is really ill-founded because things are nowhere near as challenging as the perception, and I think that's something that we need to sort of correct, really.
And where's that getting fed from? Why are people unnecessarily fearful?
I think what it is there are a range of biases that we all have. So so one such form of bias is what's called availability bias. So your brain recalls the information that is most readily at hand. So what happens is, you look through the publications and you talk to your friends and colleagues, and people will refer to something. So did you hear about that case where a friend of mine's worked with this difficulty? So you tend to focus on those things. And then you might meet a friend somewhere and say, oh, did you know so-and-so had this happen to them? So the recollection is purely based on how quickly the information is available to your brain. Now, what nobody talks about are the hundreds of patients that people see over a year where the patients are very happy with their care. So there's no balancing in a part of the equation. So, and then the other form of bias, I can just quickly cover this as well, is what's called confirmation bias. So somebody tells a friend, oh, I had this patient, I've had to give the money back because of this, this, and this. And their friend goes, well, it's funny you should say that. I had exactly the same 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Okay. So consequently, these stories then get spread, and social media contributes to that. So people say, "Oh, did you hear so and so and so and so?" And then before you know it, you think everyone's being sued left, right, and centre. Now, our data, our statistics of dental protection suggest the average dentist is likely to be sued approximately twice in a career. And if you look at all the different interactions that you make with your patients over 30 years, in percentage terms, that is a very, very, very small figure, and certainly not one to be alarmed about or concerned about.
But it's funny, aren't we? As a species, we're peculiar, aren't we? How I think we have a negativity bias, and I think a lot of that is driven by the general media. As you say, it's not interesting to talk about all those amazing patient interactions. You have one bad interaction and you double down and you focus on that and you obsess about it, and that's all you talk about. But that skews people's feeling of what's actually happening. So the way you so eloquently explain it, it makes sense why dentists would be fearful, because people aren't talking enough about, frankly, the routine, the mundane, the boring, but it goes right. And they're focusing on those very few cases that go wrong.
Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely
and
right.
Probably maybe don't feel protected. I know the GDC sometimes seems to not be the champion of that. Well, from what I see being outside of not being a dentist, but somehow it doesn't present itself as almost the champion of the dentist. It's almost like I'm going to be the hammer.
Are you familiar with Matthew Syed's book, Black Box Thinking?
I am. Yes, it's a very good book. He's a very good writer. Yeah,
it's fabulous, and the core of that on the airline industry is how, if an aeroplane goes down, they retrieve the black box. They share the learnings from that black box across the whole industry in real time, so everybody can get better. And there's also a case where there's a medical case where someone's allergic to latex, and that wasn't shared. Within dentistry, do we have an environment where people feel comfortable sharing experiences where they go wrong, so that everybody can learn in real time? And in many ways, it almost devalues the problem because it's people are being more open. Have we got a culture, an environment where people feel safe to do that?
So I think that's good. It's a very good observation that you make there, Andy. And there is no central reporting, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. And I think what's also happening is, given since the pandemic, we've become more reliant on the use of technologies, as we are doing today. We are basically doing this in a virtual environment now. For a lot of things, that environment works really, really well. My personal experience is it doesn't work as well when it comes to sharing challenges, difficult situations, and learning from error. I think those examples are best discussed on a face-to-face basis. I met a dentist last week who's a very well-known clinician, a superb clinician, and I had probably spent 2 or 3 hours in his company over dinner, and I can tell you quite openly, 50% of the conversation that we had, we would not even have approached the conversation had we met in a virtual environment. It was refreshing, it was open, it was honest, and done in an arena where each of us was totally confident that the discussions would remain private. So I think that's what we need to recreate. Maybe we need to recreate the value of mentoring. Maybe we need to reintroduce peer review as another safe space in which to discuss these challenges. But we absolutely do need to discuss them, because if you discuss things openly with people, not only do you learn from them, but you feel better having had the discussion anyway.
Yeah, definitely. It's cathartic, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah.
I suppose it's true, isn't it? When you think about technology, people can just record anything, even though it might not be recorded by Zoom or whatever. You just sit there with your phone recording it.
I think you relax more. I think when you're in someone's physical presence and you gauge the body language
it's the
and
body
the
language,
atmosphere and the mood and everything. This is great. And this is a tool that enables us to, record some content and share a podcast. It works really well. But it would be different if we were sitting physically together. It does have a difference because you get a degree of body language, but nothing like as much those real subtle nuances of people leaning in at certain
leaning
times
forward, leaning
and
back,
everything.
Yes.
And that kind of watching people closely does get lost when you're doing things in a digital
is that
way.
thing, isn't it? Because they're quite often they're not conscious observations.
No.
They're subconscious observations, but it feeds into the way we interpret stuff.
Yeah.
And a very good recent example of this actually is I was doing a presentation a few weeks ago in northwest London. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the organizer had said to me, if you're free in the evening, please join us for dinner. And we had a gap between the end of the presentation and the dinner, 90 minutes. And a few people very kindly come up and very patiently waited to speak to me. And these are all people, two of them were members of Dental Protection, the third one wasn't. And in each and every case, they wanted to have a private conversation about something that had happened to them. And in each and every case, at the end, they said to me, "Thank you very much for the time. I feel so much better. I'm really pleased that I came and had a chance to talk to you." Okay. In each case, I did not give those people any information that they did not already have. In each and every case, I did not give them any insight that they didn't already have. But in each and every case, what I did give them was a little bit of time for exploration. And, what struck me as I was driving home that day, I thought, I feel very pleased that I took part in that event today, because 3 people who had issues went home a little bit happier, but only because they had the opportunities to spend time. And I think that's what's missing nowadays. We live in a very fast-paced world, and people just don't have the time to sit and discuss. And often that's all you need.
It's very true.
Yeah, I think that's slowing down. It's going back to what you were saying earlier about get good at something and then make it efficient.
Yes.
Isn't it? And I think that flows through a lot of things. We do seem to be dashing from one place to the next. And if it can't be summarised in 20 seconds, then I'm not interested. Type society. Another dimension to your life, Raj, is you're also a member of the Magic Circle as well. And the reason this interests me is I think magic's an art form, without a shadow of a doubt. It's an art
Yeah.
form, and the amount of dentists that have an artistic side to them. You know, we've had break dancers, musicians, dancers, painters, and I'm interested. What drew you into magic?
Well, the answer to that is very straightforward. I still remember the event. So I was 11 years old. We'd gone round to see my uncle, and my uncle showed me a trick with a handkerchief and a coin. And I said to him, "Oh, that's very clever. How do you do that?" And he said, "I'm not telling you." I said, "Oh, come on, Uncle, please tell me." He refused to tell me. So,
Like a true magician.
like so it bothered me that I couldn't work out how it was done, and it bothered me in a nice way that he was teasing me and not telling me. So I went to the local library. We used to go to the local library every Saturday morning, and I borrowed a book called Magic for Beginners. I learned an effect. Next time we were in my uncle's house, I said, "Uncle, I have something to show you." I showed him an effect, and he said, "Oh, that's very good." He says, "How do you do that?" I said, "Uncle, I'm not telling you." And the reaction on his face, I looked at the reaction on his face, and I thought to myself, "This is amazing." You know, it was the reaction. It was absolutely the reaction. And that's pretty much how it all started. And then when I was at dental school, one of the students in the year above me was treating a patient who was a professional magician. So when he qualified, one of the things that he had to do was pass his patients on to the year below. So he said to me, "I'm going to pass this gentleman to you. He's a professional magician." And then through him, I got my associate membership of the Magic Circle, and then later on the full membership. So
it's hard, isn't it, to become part of the Magic Circle, isn't it? I think
it's not. I mean, it's not. It's a discipline like all disciplines.
Right.
But if you are properly prepared and trained, then it's achievable comfortably.
So do you do magic at Christmas?
I don't do magic.
Family parties or whatever.
I occasionally will do family events.
Brilliant.
We have a wedding in the family in August, and they've said to me, "Okay, Dad, you've got 20 minutes."
Oh,
so
really?
I'm contemplating whether to come up with something for that or not.
Saw your wife in half or something.
I think the art of it is wonderful. Many years ago, I saw Penn and Teller, and they deconstructed magic into kind of 6 or 7 steps, and they explained each step by step, like, you know, the deception. They went through the whole thing, and then they put it together into a magic trick. And the sleight of hand and speed of it, and the distraction was just incredible. And the thing that surprised me most is they'd shown us step by step what was going to happen. But when it was put together, you still couldn't believe that it happened, because it was so slick, and it really is an art form. Do you have a favourite magician?
Yes. So Penn and Teller are just incredible. I've seen them live at a couple of events in London, and at one event I kind of stood in the queue so I could actually meet them, you know, personally, which was, it was a wonderful moment, really. And they're so humble with their success and technically perfect. And the example that you're quoting, Andy, I think it's when they do their cups and balls routine.
Yes.
And they do a very famous cups and balls routine. And the beauty of it, they use plastic cups so you can actually see through the cup. You know, so you know exactly what's happening, but you're still fooled by it. So Paul Daniels, who passed away a few years ago, Paul Daniels was a marvelous magician. As a youngster, I used to be addicted to watching David Nixon on television. And a good friend of mine, David Redfern, who's a professional magician. David is an awesome performer, and he's kind of my sort of mentor, my go-to person for advice and tips. And he is an amazing teacher. Yeah.
Brilliant. Just wrapping up before we come to our 2 special questions. Whilst you kind of, you know, modestly sideline the word entrepreneur, you are an entrepreneur within dentistry. What do you think the key skill you need to master to be a successful entrepreneur?
You can't tell us.
Well, I thought there was a gag in there when you were at dental school about making your patients' caries disappear, but we've moved on.
Teeth removal.
I think for me, the key is to start off from a position of optimism, rather than look at an opportunity and think, oh, no, that's not going to work, is to make an assumption that there is potential here. And then to see whether or not the potential can be realized. And sometimes you may feel with an opportunity that potential can be realized and you run with it. Other times you think, actually, I don't think it can be realized with my input, but it may be that others are able to influence the direction of travel in a slightly different way. So I think it's all about mindset initially, come at it from a position of optimism. But also, when you make key decisions, before the decision is actually implemented, however confident you are about the decision, I think it's important to pause and just sit in a room on your own and very quietly say to yourself, what if I'm wrong? Yeah, what if I'm wrong? And that's a good sort of self-check mechanism, because it forces you to run through the more negative connotations associated with proposals. So for me, those are the kind of two main areas of entrepreneurship. I think I don't particularly subscribe to the view that it's a skill as such. I think it's a discipline. That's just my personal take on it.
No, I like that. I like that. And just to finish up, Raj, if you were a fly on the wall in a situation, where would you be and who would be there? What would be happening?
Oh my goodness. I think if I was I've always wanted or always thought, what would it be like to sit in a room where you had, say, 4 or 5 of the world's best, say, script writers or authors, and they have a blank sheet of paper in front of them, and they're given 3 days to come up with a comedy series or a detective series. And I would just love watching them and how they go about their craft when you start off with a blank sheet of paper. I've always been fascinated by the creative process.
Yeah.
Did you do any sort of, I know you wrote your short stories, but did you do any sort of training for that or education, or did you just like write?
No, I just wrote. My parents very kindly had I subscribed to a correspondence course, as they were called in those days, on writing skills. I don't think it helped me a huge amount. And I occasionally toy with the idea of doing a creative writing course. A couple of my friends have done that. But I wouldn't want to start it unless I was confident I had the time to devote to it. So I think for me, but it remains an unfulfilled ambition to still write a short novel of some description.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I say everyone's got a book in them.
Yes.
Everyone's got a book in a song, I reckon.
That's true. Not just sure about the song, but you don't want to hear me sing, trust me.
Oh, me and you both, Raj. Me and you both. And if you could meet somebody, who would you like the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with?
Oh, gosh. Well, I have on my, you can't see it from here, but I have on the wall of my study, I have a print of a wonderful painting called the School of Athens, which is in the Vatican. And the School of Athens is a picture by Raphael, and he portrays all the famous Greek and Roman philosophers, scientists, astronomers. So sorry about that.
That's all right.
Do you want to repeat the question and we do it again?
Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it.
Okay. Sorry.
What we love about this is we tend to not edit stuff out because this is real life. And going back to what you were saying before, that I think quite often we get such a sanitized, edited version of life. I love the fact that there is the real world happens.
Why it was a Mission Impossible.
It was
Mission Impossible for who you wanted to meet. There you go.
Yeah, and the reason the Mission Impossible theme is on this is because musically I'm very, very ignorant. And one of the tasks I've set myself for this year is to learn to play the Mission Impossible theme tune on a piano.
Oh, wow. There you go.
So that's the background to the choice. Anyway.
To keep reminding you to practice.
You see, Raj, that's the start of your song.
Yeah.
Learn to play the piano. Next thing, it'll be a Raj song.
So anyway, so there's this picture, and it's got philosophers, pictures of Archimedes, Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, you name it, probably 50 different people. And the world would not be where it is today without the contribution of these individuals. So I would welcome a opportunity to have a discussion with the central figure in that picture. The vanishing point of that picture takes you to Aristotle, because I think his words and his wisdom have stood the test of time, and the principles that he talked about 2,000 years ago we can still apply today. And when we search for meaning in the world, and we search for solace, and we search for sort of peace and so forth, or meaning in particular, as I've said, I think these things have already been discovered. We just need to go to the past and learn from the past masters.
Yeah, well,
I think it's something that you said to me earlier, Chris, before we went live on this broadcast. You said the principles of dealing with people haven't changed in thousands of years. So it reflects that sentiment.
That's right. Our brains are the same as they were. They just get different information in different ways.
Absolutely. Raj, it's been a joy. Thank you so much for your time. Like I said, I'm fascinated that you've done so much, but I think the energy you've got and the love for the profession, I think there's going to be a bunch more stuff still yet to be written.
Yeah. That's very, very kind. I appreciate that. And thank you for your time today as well. And
I feel very mellow. I think Raj exudes mellowness, don't you? It's like
very calming. Very calming.
You should do like, is it Matthew McConaughey does
the bedtime stories.
Bedtime stories. Relax to Raj. Look at that. It's a whole new career.
Exactly.
Brilliant, Raj. Thanks very much, man.
It's a great pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Cheers. Look after yourself. Cheers.
Thank you.
Dada. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.